there, this is Malorian, and this will be another Warmachine 101 where I try and hit all the basics. And today's going to be one that's going to start easy and actually get a little bit more complicated, but we're going to be talking about the list chicken. So what this is you make your list, you go down to play, and you're basically exchanging lists, and you're looking at their list. Now, at the very simplest side of this, you are looking at it as, okay, I'm looking at their list, what's the tricks I'm looking at? Then once you start getting into 2 lists and then 3 lists, things get a little bit more complicated. So we're going to be starting at the very simplest side and then going from there. Now, the very first thing I want to talk about, though, before I even get into that, is why does Privateer Press even have this multiple list system? Well, the whole idea of doing this is to really balance the game. Like in any game that has lots of choices, you're going to be getting to a situation where you have this whole rock, paper, scissors, where, okay, this list has an advantage against this, and so really just at setup, you have a good idea of who has the advantage. Now, the more that you can eliminate that, the better. So whenever you have this whole pairing system, you have the ability now to say, whoa, he has a lot of scissors. It's a good thing I went and I took, some rock to deal with that, right? And so basically it helps mitigate that. It's probably not going to make it perfect, but it helps to mitigate that. Now, let's start getting into it, and we're going to talk about the simplest one, which is really just the one list versus the one list. You have now traded, and you're taking a look at their list. Well, you're going to want to look at their caster. You're going to want to look at their units. And you want to try and starting to ascertain what's going to be their game plan and what's going to be the tricks they're going to be using during the game. Now, this might seem like something that's really easy, like, oh, it's a gun line. This is simple. However, first of all, for a newish player, it can be very, very difficult. If you don't know this caster, well, how can you really know what they're trying to do? If you kind of know the caster but not the feat, if you kind of know the units, but what's this UA? I have no idea what this UA is. And so as a new player, this is probably the time now where the clock hasn't started yet. You're just looking at lists. We can say, can I just have your cards? And then at the same time, while looking at these models, looking at the list rather, you can actually just look through the cards and, okay, what's this caster? Whoa, okay, he has this feat, he has these spells. So as a new player, don't feel that this is a huge negative. Coming from the other side, I would much rather you ask for these rules before the game rather than get into the middle of a game and then all of a sudden it's on somebody's clock and it's a lot more of a hassle, kind of breaks up the flow of the game. So ask those questions and learn about these things before it even starts. Now, after that, really try and understand, like I said, what's the goal of the list and what type of little extra tricks do they have. So the best way of looking at that is like the feat. Okay, what does the feat do? Who does the feat help in this list? What about the spells? What spells are going to be helping what units in this list? And from this too as well, you have to really make sure you keep the scenario in mind. Because for the most part, when they're making a list, maybe it's going to be assassination, right? Maybe they're taking Kane 2 or Striker 2, and you know, okay, these guys are going for assassination. Well, if you look at the scenario, and all of a sudden you see it's kill box, that's a really big deal. Because if I'm forced to get closer, assassination is a much bigger factor. So the fact that they're taking an assassination list gets that much more important of a fact. Now, what if they're going for scenario? Let's say, for example, they're going for Haley 2 or Kruger 2 or Gordon. All of a sudden you're going to see this and say, well, okay, let's look at the scenario. Is it something where there's lots of ways to score lots of points very quickly? Is it something where it's like incursion and it's really hard to contest because there's a very small area? Or is there really actually just like one long zone between us and I can easily just get in there and contest it and it won't be that big of a deal? Again, the fact that they're running a scenario list, its effectiveness is going to be very much determined by the scenario. So take a look at that scenario. as well, maybe they're going to be running something like attrition. Maybe they're going to be running something like Maylock, and they're just going to keep on raising up gators for days. Well, you have to keep that in mind, especially if you're running a list with a lot of models in it. It usually gets pretty low on time anyway. If they're going for that grind, they might be trying to death clock you. So you got to keep that in mind as well. So once you're done that, if you've gone through the list, you've compared it to the scenario, and you know, okay, this is their game plan, this is what they're trying to do, the next step that you need to bring in is compare theirs to yours. Because clearly you've done the same thing. You have made your own list to be based around some general game plan, plus you have those aces up your sleeve that you're always ready to use. And what you need to then understand and try and think about is how effective will this be on each other? So your own tricks. I'm going for a really shooty type of list where I have a lot of guns. Well, if I look across at the other side and you have a lot of shield guards, or maybe you're running Barnabas so you can just ignore it, or maybe there's a lot of stealth, oh, all of a sudden that's not that great of an idea. If all of a sudden my game plan is to go for a scenario, but you have a lot of little incorporeal things. You have a couple of feral guys you're going to run up. You have a colossal that can just step in the zone and I can't TK it out, right? These are very big things I need to be looking for. And then the same thing for theirs coming back. And from that, you want to start trying to think about who actually has the advantage. Now, from this as well, you might want to try and play out the game in your mind. Say, okay, this will be their advanced deploy. I can shoot that down. We'll probably trade this and this and this and try and play it out. But however you do that, you need to try and find a way of thinking for yourself of who has the advantage. And once you can do that, try and decide how big of an advantage is this. Is this something where, oh, it's basically 50-50, or you know what, he has the advantage, or I have the advantage, or you know what, I am screwed. This list does not work against that one, or he's screwed. He just can't stop what I'm doing. Now, with that in mind, I really like to think of it as a 5-point system. So in that case, if I give it a 1, I figure I have no chance. If I give it a 2, I'm probably going to lose. If I give it a 3, okay, 50-50. A 4, I have the advantage. On a 5, I got this. I'll bet the house on it. It's no problem. Now, an important factor to keep in mind of this as well is also the skill level of the two players. Now, it could be that if this was just the lists, and this is, everybody's a robot and everybody's the same, okay, you have the advantage. You have, let's say it's Kruger 2 versus Kane 2. It's like, wow, Stormwall, the spell, is really going to shut down my shooting. But I've been playing for 2 years, and this is his first game. All of a sudden, it's like, okay, I'm pretty sure now I have the advantage. So keep that in mind as well. I guess with that, I can add in a little kind of things you should be listening for. If they say from across the table, oh, wow, I've never seen this before, or wow, how does this work? And if you know that there's kind of that knowledge gap there, use it to your advantage. You don't have to be the jerk and not tell them things, but know that you're probably you get a little bit more of an advantage from that. So that's really the easiest one, right? That's one list versus one list, piece of cake. Well, what happens when you go down to that next step and you each have 2 lists? This is where the real list chicken comes in. And what you need to really do is look at this as you have your A list and your B list, and they have their A list and their B list. And you're going to be going and comparing those. So what I'll do is, using the same process that I had already talked about, where I'm looking at their lists, I'm trying to see what their game plan and tricks are, I'm comparing it to what the scenario is. Now, I'm going to start comparing and doing those numbers. So, let's say my A versus their A. I have a 4. I figure that, my A is going to kick their A's butt. But my A versus their B, that doesn't look good. That's going to be a 2. Then I'll go to my B list. Okay, my B versus their A. You know what? That's about a 50-50. It's about, I don't know where that's going to go. My B versus their B. Pretty much the same thing. We're pretty equally matched. The tricks are pretty much the same. Nothing really counters. It's basically a 50-50. Now, if you're doing this, one of the first things I like to do is look at the math. So add those numbers together. So we had a 4 and a 2, that's a 6. And the other one, a 3 and a 3, it's a 6. So in this case, it's a tie there. However, you could have it so that, oh, okay, actually when you look at this one here, this one will end up with a higher number. There's all the different situations. But okay, by the numbers, this one is probably the one to go with. However, this is when you start getting into this little bit of a psychological game with your opponent as well. So you have to start thinking about the game then from their perspective and say, maybe in the beginning, if I had no other information, I looked at this and it was 4 and 2 and 3 and 3, both of them were coming up with a 6. You know what? I'm going to go with B. I'm going to go with B because it's going to be an even game. I know that I can just use my skills and try and win by just being a better player. And, with A, I'm basically flipping a coin. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to be this guy that goes to a tournament, flips a coin, and that's the game. I'd rather go with B so it's based off of skill. And that's valid. However, if you start looking at it from their side and start thinking like, okay, when they start matching theirs against my own, it really looks like they're actually going to be dropping their A-list. That seems like what they would actually want to drop against me. And so if I think they're going to be dropping their A-list, well, then all of a sudden it's a very simple thing, right? I gave my A a 4 and my B a 3. Oh, well, I'm going to be going with my A then. However, what happens if they do take that B and all of a sudden now you're in a bad situation? So it's all up to you if you want to play by the numbers, if you want to be playing by your gut feeling of what you think is going to happen. But just know that there could be some very dire consequences. Now, there's a couple other factors you should probably also keep in mind. First of all, if you feel that they probably do have the skill advantage, you might want to go for that coin toss. If you're going into this game and it's like, well, I basically would just need like one desperate assassination if this is ever going to work. And this guy's a really good player. Maybe go with that assassination one, knowing that you can't do the 50-50 because they got the better skills. So just go for the assassination and hope that it pulls off. The other thing is what if the tournament has divide and conquer? So some tournaments have it so that you have divide and conquer. You have to use each list a number of times. And what can happen is that as you get further along in the tournament, you can, first of all, look at their lists and their scores to see which list they've been favoring so far and see if they're locked in. So if you're going into the third game in a 4-game tournament, they've already used one list twice. It's divide and conquer 1. They could use either list. However, they probably want to go with the one other list so they don't get list locked into the last game. So use those things to your advantage to try and get that leg up in this list chicken. So that's really the 2 list now. So it's the same basic principles as the 1 list, but now you got to start doing a little bit of math, a little bit more thought, taking a little bit more risks. And then we get on to Masters. Now on Masters, you have 3 lists. And that just makes this a lot more complicated. You actually follow exactly the same steps, but it gets a lot tougher. So in this case, start doing the same thing. Read through their lists, understand what their game plan is, what tricks they have, look at the scenario, and try and get that figuring of how that's going to interact with each other. Then do the same process as you did before. Now, this will be a lot more complicated because you're doing more comparisons. So what I actually suggest for this one is actually have a pad of paper and a pen or pencil, or you can always just write it on your sheet as well, on the back of your score sheet, whatever you want. But it'll help you a lot more to have those numbers down and not lose the numbers in your head. So in this case, let's say I'm looking at my A versus their A. Ooh, that's a bad one. I'm giving it a 2. My A versus their B, again, that's a bad one, a 2. A versus C, another 2. So we're probably not going with A. Now, how about B? Okay, that's about a 50-50 against A. So a 3 against B, another 50-50, and same thing in C. So this one's a pretty good well-rounder, not really big advantages, could go either way. Now I'll look at C. And I'll look at C and I'll say, okay, Actually, wow, this one seems to be the counter list. So C, I'll give a 4 against A. I'll give a 4 against B. Oh, it would be bad against that C. That C one's a good one against me. So I'm just going to write a 2. So what you can do then is that once you have all those numbers, you can try that math. And all of a sudden I see like, oh, well, A, I got a 4, or sorry, a 6. So that's not all that great. My B is a 9, so it's all right. But my C, that's a 10. So by the numbers, I should be going with C. However, again, you now have to be looking at that coming the other way. And whereas you would think, okay, I probably want to go with my C because that had the highest numbers. Well, if we looked across this list, we saw that a lot of times C was a list that was going to do a lot better against us, either just as good or a lot better against C, RC. So they're probably going to go with their C, which means you should be dropping your B. So again, you can really get lost in all these comparisons, and this is just going with the pure math, right? Where you're going through the numbers for your side, going through the numbers from their side, and then just really going with probability. And then going past this, starting to play those mind games, right? And trying to guess, oh, he's probably going to do this, so I should counter with this. You know, I know this guy. He loves Hexerus. Oh, he's probably going to do that for sure. So how much do you want to lean on that is kind of up to you. Now, something that will be a lot more common in their master's lists that you can also see in the 2 lists, but you should really keep in mind here is that this whole process could be a lot simpler. And that's really if they go with a skew list. So most lists will have a focus. So this is going to be their game plan. These are going to be their tricks. But a skew list takes one of those in particular and pushes it all the way as far as they can. So maybe they're going to be going out with a massive armor skew, or with a whole bunch of high defense skew, or maybe just lots of guys. Another good example could be like Butcher 2, his tier list, where it's just Doom Reavers everywhere. And what you really need to do then is say, wow, as that skew list is there, what they're going to do is say, all right, first step, skew list. Can they deal with my skew? No? All right, I'm running my skew. So that's definitely something you have to be keeping in mind. So if you notice that type of a skew list, go through yours and say, okay, who cares about the other lists right now? What can deal with that skew? A, nope. B, nope. Only C? All right, looks like I'm dropping C. Now again, they could be doing this to catch you off guard. Let's say, for example, their skew list is a double galleon. So it's a really high armor with Bartolo. And you think, wow, I need to take my armor cracking list, so I'm going to take all these heavies. And then all of a sudden, they're playing a game where they want you to take heavies. They're going to black oil you. They're going to try and just tie you all up. They're going to go for a scenario. You know, they could be playing that game. However, most of the time, you just can't take that risk, because a lot of times that skew list, if you see that there, is something that's their big ace. That they're just going from game to game saying, okay, if you can't beat that, I win. You can't deal with high defense, I win. So really keep that in mind. So otherwise, that's really it. And for the most part, if you can get really good at this list chicken, you'll do just a lot better in the game. Now, of course, the first level to this is just pure knowledge. You know, go out there, start learning all the casters, all the units, what they can do, because if you don't have that fundamental knowledge, you just cannot make those comparisons. The next thing to do is actually practice doing list chickens. A lot of groups, what they'll do for casual gaming is just bring one list, right? Oh, I have this constants list I want to try out. I'll just bring this down. But if you do not practice doing that whole list chicken during your casual gaming, you will not be prepared to do it in your tournament games. So just try and push your group, saying, all right, guys, I know you really want to do this or that list, but can we come with 2 lists so we can go through the list chicken? And worst case scenario, if you do have a group that says, no, screw that, I'm only going to bring the models I need, I'm bringing one list, deal with it, well, you can always practice the list chicken on your own. Go to one of the several websites that list the tournament lists from the grand tournaments and all the larger cons, and just by yourself, take your tournament pairing and start doing those list chickens against them. A good one for that could be Discount Games. They have a tournament area where they just have all the lists. They're starting to populate in there. So you can go in there and start saying, okay, what do I have against these? Now, that'll do two things for you. One, it'll really help you, give you that practice of doing that list chicken and getting faster at it and better at it. But it may improve your list as well, right? If you're going through there and you're doing your list chicken and you realize, wow, I actually have nothing to deal with these trolls here. I need to really think about that. And then all of a sudden, by doing that little bit of practice, you can change your list so that not only will you be better at the list chicken in the tournament, you'll also have better lists that cover more situations for the actual tournament as well. So there you go. That's going to be the Warhammer 101 on the list chicken. If you have anything else you want me to cover, please post it down below and I'll try and get to it. But otherwise, thanks for watching and we'll catch you later. Bye.